Welcome back, everybody. Today, we're going to be looking on the topic of obesity. So let's begin by defining obesity. It is characterized by an excess of body fat, and it's often accompanied by increasing circulating plasma free fatty acid concentration. In simpler terms, it's a condition where the body accumulates more fat than what is considered healthy. One common method we use to categorize obesity is through body mass index or BMI. This metric is calculated by dividing an individual's weight in kilogram by their height in meter, and then we square it. So why BMI is important? A BMI greater than 30 indicates obesity. And so this measurement serves as a valuable tool for healthcare professionals to assess an individual's risk of obesity-related health complications and tailor appropriate intervention. And this is the classification of body fatness and BMI according to your WHO. So BMI can fall into several categories, which is underweight, that's a BMI of less than 18.5, normal weight, which is about 18.5 to 24.9, overweight being from 25 to 29.9, and somebody who's obese from about 30 to 34.9, an extremely obese person would be anything above 35. And this classification system is really very cheap tool, also really very simple for people to assess their weight status in relation to the risk factors for various health conditions. BMI is a widely used metric for assessing weight status, but it has some limitations. One issue is that it doesn't differentiate between muscle and fat. So it may misclassify individuals with high muscle mass as being overweight or obese. For example, the football players over here. Additionally, it doesn't account for differences in body composition between genders or ethnicities. It's also not a comprehensive measure of health since it doesn't consider factors like fitness level, distribution of fat, or overall body composition. So another valuable method for assessing overweight and obesity that goes beyond BMI and incorporates considerations such as frame size, body composition, lean body mass index, and waist circumference. This approach offers a more comprehensive evaluation, accounting for factors like bone structure, distinguishing between individuals with larger or smaller bone frames, and muscle mass, which can vary widely among individuals. So by incorporating frame size into the assessment, it provides a more nuanced understanding of body composition and weight status, allowing for more personalized health evaluations. Body composition is important as there are different health risks carrying weights in different ways. We have two pictures over here, and both of them are obese based on your BMI. But what is different is where the weight is distributed. Gynoid obesity is oftentimes referred to as pear-shaped body fat distribution, and it's characterized by the accumulation of body fat in the buttocks and upper legs. This type of obesity is also known as gluteofemoral adipose tissue accumulation, and it's more common in women. Gynoid obesity typically involves more subcutaneous fat, which is located just beneath the skin. While individuals with gynoid obesity may have a better prognosis compared to those with android obesity, it can be more challenging to treat them due to the stubborn nature of subcutaneous fat that exists in these areas under the skin. On the other hand, we have your android obesity, and that is often termed as your apple-shaped body fat distribution. It involves the accumulation of fat predominantly in the abdomen and upper body, including the neck, arms, and shoulders. This type of obesity is characterized by abdominal adipose tissue accumulation, with a higher proportion of visceral fat, and that is fat that surrounds the internal organs. So android obesity is more common in men and is associated with a greater risk for obesity-related complications. Also, such as your type 2 diabetes, cardiovascular disease, and metabolic syndrome. This is due to the pressure on the internal organs for carrying that much of body fat. The relationship between BMI and waist circumference is significant in assessing health risks associated with obesity. A normal BMI may not necessarily indicate a lower risk of cardiovascular disease, type 2 diabetes, and high blood pressure if waist circumference exceeds certain thresholds. For men, a waist circumference greater than 102 cm or more than 40 inches, and for women, greater than 88 cm or more than 35 inches, signifies an increased risk of these diseases, even with a normal BMI. Moreover, individuals classified as overweight already face heightened risk. However, those with higher waist circumference face substantially elevated risk of developing these diseases, emphasizing the importance of considering abdominal fat distribution alongside BMI measurements in assessing health risk. We do have to be very careful when using waist circumference. Similar to the same problem when using BMI, if you are European descent, you have a certain waist circumference that will determine if you have a higher risk of certain types of diseases. If you are a different ethnic group, it's going to vary in terms of if you're South Asian, Chinese, Japanese, you'll have a different waist circumference. The waist circumference for men is a little less than for Western Europeans than it is for Asian. As we can see, for Europeans, it's about 94 cm. For South Asians, it should be less than 90 cm. And that is because of we have to take into factors like height. Europeans are a lot more taller compared to Asians. And we also do not have enough data for some ethnic groups, which really suggests a problem we need to correct due to the associated risk. This chart is comparing some of the differences between BMI and waist circumference. What are the weaknesses and benefits? And we can see that for waist circumference is that we do not have a lot of data. So for BMI, we have been using that for a very long time, so we have collected a lot of data for that. The relationship between BMI and visceral fat is weak, as BMI is a measure of overall body weight relative to height and doesn't specifically account for fat distribution. Also, BMI serves as a modest predictor of multiple health risks in individuals, but can be confounded by differences in muscle mass, and this could lead to potential inaccuracies. On the other hand, waist circumference, while prone to larger measurement errors compared to BMI, is emerging as a stronger predictor of various health risks in individuals. It provides insights into visceral fat accumulation, which is associated with heightened health risk. Despite its limitation, waist circumference is considered a better predictor of total body fat and related health risks at a population level compared to BMI. And we can break down the health consequences of obesity to increased risk, which is about 1 to 2, moderately increased risk, which is about 2 to 3, and greatly increased risk, which is about more than 3. And so as you get heavier and heavier, you do have a slight increase for the different kinds of cancers, such as abdominal cancer, especially if your waist circumference is high. This is because you're going to be carrying a lot more weight, and you're going to be putting a lot more stress on your spine. And there will be more joint-related problems. So if you have to go for surgery, the more obese you are, the greater the risk of dying or having complications related to that anesthesia. And if you look at the moderately increased risk, people who are obese, they have a terrible time with arthritis in their knees. If you go and look through knee replacement data, the majority of the people who are getting knee replacement are from people that are obese. Unfortunately, knee replacement surgeries have a limited lifespan. The heavier you are, the more stress you're going to put on the replacement itself. So the normal lifespan for knee replacement appliances will only last for about 10 years, depending on which appliances you install. The higher level of obesity, the net number of years is going to decrease. So for example, if someone is really obese, they have to have repeated knee replacement surgeries. And there's only a limited number that you are able to have, especially if you're really young and obese, your knees are going to wear out a lot faster. And usually, typically, you only can have about 3 to 4 knee replacement surgeries throughout your lifetime, as we do not have enough tissues to kind of support the appliance, which potentially could lead to earlier knee issues in the future if somebody who's suffering from obesity at a really young age. Also, we can talk in terms of the high uric acid concentration, and that is associated with gout and the accumulation of uric acid crystals in the joints. And we see a lot of that in people's feet and toes who are obese, because that is where your uric acid accumulates. And then, of course, there's also the associated complications with pregnancy. And we can also, it looks in terms of the greatly increased risk where you have diabetes, hypertension, elevated levels of cholesterol and triglycerides, breathlessness, sleep apnea, and also gallbladder disease. And finally, this picture does a really good job in summarizing the health problems associated with obesity, and you can go through this yourself. So this slide shows the map of the US and how the percentage of obesity has changed in several years. We can start off in 1990, where we see that there is anywhere less than about 15%, and how that has consistently increased with people getting more and more obese and overweight. And we can see up to 2009, some states are reaching that 25 to 29%. And this is the prevalence of obesity in 2022 in America. And we can notice that it really varies across different states. Especially we look at Colorado and California, it's significantly lower compared to the national average. And this can be attributed to various factors. And I want you to think of some of the different factors that, is causing that lower rates of obesity in both those places. But we can see in certain places, like in the South, in Louisiana and Oklahoma, we see that numbers going up to about 45 to 50%. And this is what projections are kind of showing in terms of the rates of obesity in America for 2030. And it reveals a really troubling trend, particularly in the southern parts of the country, where your obesity rates are expected to soar to more than 60%. And so this projection really does highlight a significant and concerning escalation of the obesity epidemic with profound implications for public health and healthcare systems. All right, so let's look at the timeline of what has really been driving the obesity epidemic here in America. And so if we look in the 1930s, the Wall Street crash led to widespread economic hardship, affecting food accessibility and dietary habits. Also, the onset of World War II disrupted food supplies and led to rationing in many countries, altering eating patterns. Also, that's when we saw your Twinkies, Tootsie Pops, Fritos, and Lay's potato chips were invented, and again marking that beginning of readily available processed snacks. In the 1940s, while many men were serving in the war, a significant number of women entered the workforce, and that impacted again your meal dynamics and also food choices. In the 1950s, the post-war period, we saw an increase in the number of babies being born yearly, and that led to changes in family structures and meal preparation. Also, we saw convenience foods started gaining popularity, like your Eggo frozen waffles, TV dinners, special K cereal became household staples, reflecting a growing demand for convenience meal option. In 1960s, we had the Vietnam War era, and that influenced food consumption patterns and introduced a generation to your fast food chain, like your Taco Bell. And we can also see what happened in the 1970s. Again, that heavily convenience food, like your hamburger helpers, mint chocolate chip ice cream, and egg muffins were invented. In the 1980s, some of the iconic snacks were your Totino's pizza rolls and your yogurt push pops. And again, the rise of your snacking culture. In 1990s, some of the iconic snacks were Lunchables, Go-Gurt, 3D Doritos, exemplifying the convenience-focused snacks options that were available during that time period. In early 2000s, we saw Fruit Loop cereal straws, Hershey's Kisses, your yogurt jello pudding pops, and again, how that kind of influenced food production and consumption practices. In recent events, we in 2020, in 2010 to about 2020, we saw the earthquake and tsunami in Japan, along with a growing awareness of global warming. And we noticed that there was a shift towards, again, to more vegetarian options or vegan-friendly options. So we saw your Impossible Burger. We also noticed Ruby chocolates that were invented. And in 2023, we see that again, the earthquake in Syria and Turkey and the ongoing environmental challenges and how is that impacting food security and access. And looking in America, what are some of the most preferred cuisines or global food preferences? Italian cuisine still remains a popular choice, followed by Japanese cuisine, and reflecting the diversity of global culinary preferences. And if you look at these are just some of the pictures, from the 1950s, 1960s. So what kind of food is Spam? And Spam is actually an inexpensive meat product. It was created in the 1930s, and the name is a combination of spice and ham. And it was an instant hit, and it was a staple food for soldiers during World War II. And also what we can see over here, the advertising campaign of Betty Crocker. And she's not a real person, It was just an advertising campaign which was developed in 1921. And she became the Dear Abby of cooking, where women all over America could write to her and listen to a radio show, and Bessie would answer all their questions. And we also have that Pillsbury snack. And Pillsbury was actually involved in food that was used by astronauts, but it was also really very popular in your grocery store. And it was like space food sticks, which was basically chocolate and peanut butter. And we also had things like your dandelion salads, and that was also really very popular in the 1950s and 1960s. Here we have your vitamin donuts, okay? And it was a claim that each donut is fortified with a minimum of 25 units of vitamin B1. And the product promised to provide Americans a dose of pep and vigor. And we know that it was pulled out of the shelves because there was not much substantial truth to it. There was also Rosie the Riveter, where we're getting women into the workforce during World War II, taking on industrial jobs traditionally held by men. And her iconic image with a flex arm and the slogan, "We can do it," represents the strength, determination, and contribution of women to the World War effort and broader societal shifts during that time.